Welcome back. Of course, you're watching DBS, and this is Dolor Factor Live, and we're live in the studio with Francesca Plummer-Gabriel and Karen Tovier. We were talking before about mental attitudes, and we want you to question yours. But before we actually go into the kind of the meat of it, Francesca, tell us a little bit about yourself and your, what your role is. I described you as a psychotherapist, so perhaps you can tell us what that entails, what it means.
Okay, I'm a psychotherapist and counselor. I've been doing that for 10 years here in Saint Lucia. And really, psychotherapy is a talking cure. It involves helping people to understand the source of their concerns or problems or issues, and help them to find a way to deal with it, to cope. So really it works to get people well, better coping. And usually that happens between an individual and a professionally trained therapist or counselor.
And how long would you have to train for?
Well, I have my master's, and obviously my first degree in psychology, and then a master's in psychotherapy and counseling. And that is generally considered the minimum training to be able to practice clinically.
Wow, well, just hearing that, I got a headache. And I'm thinking, after doing all that, I mean, you have to be really strong to be mentally stable to be studying those kind of things. So congratulations.
You have to be.
And thank you for being here. Karen, not a stranger to Saint Lucia and DBS television screen, but please tell us about yourself.
Oh, what is there? Well, you introduced me as the chairperson of the Saint Lucia Calypso Association. I am by profession an events and PR person. I also do a lot of training, and I love the training part of what I do. I love dealing with people. I'm a people's person. I think I need some of that psychotherapy. I think I'm going to have to become friends with Francisca. Yeah, I suppose. Oh, and a very, very proud mother of two wonderful, absolutely beautiful sons. That's the pride of my life, yes. Okay. I think that's Karen.
Good, well, congratulations on that. And one of the reasons why you're here is because we know that you have no qualms in talking about day-to-day things.
Not at all.
And day-to-day in St. Lucia, we are faced with seeing people who perhaps are not totally well, and I know that you would not, keep things in. You will discuss it.
When you are a mother, you go through periods when you are not totally well.
That's right. That's part of it, isn't it?
Having
That's part
a 3-year-old, I can understand.
I have 2 boys, so yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. But I mean, mental illness is a very serious issue in St. Lucia. We see it all around. And sometimes, I think a lot of people, I hate to say, take it for granted. It's just like, oh, just one of those things. And people can name the people who we feel are not well. I have seen so many different ways that, people treat some of the people who aren't well. So what I want us to start off with is the definition of what is it. People say they're mad. People call them all different names that I don't want to repeat because you know what they are. But when we look at it in the health arena, we'll say mental illness, mental wellness. That seems to be the more kind of modern term at the moment. Mental wellness, it's a disease, it's a condition. Francisco, what is it really? What's the right term to use?
So generally we will distinguish between two things, which is mental health and mental illness. Mental health is generally considered like a state of well-being, which all of us need, really. We need it to be able to cope with life, to get along with our relationships, to work productively, etc. Okay. Mental illness, on the other hand, is the other end of the continuum, and that really looks at a disturbance in thinking or mood or behavior that some people experience through their lives. And there are various types of mental disorders. So really, mental illness is like an umbrella term that, looks at a group of disorders which have that common thread, which is that there's some kind of disturbance for people in their thinking, their mood, or their behavior.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question. When I was actually talking to the production team and I asked the question, there was a pause and then it was like, what? I want to ask this question because I think that it's something that we take for granted. Simple question. When someone is born, can they be born mentally ill?
Well, generally we will say that people are born with a predisposition.
Let me stop you just one second, because Karen, you see the kind of expression you had? That's what my team, I think a lot of people, they don't think about someone is born mentally ill. They just think it's a life whatever it is.
That it happens along the way as you grow, as you develop.
Yes.
Something happens there. Yeah.
Yes.
I think I could understand the predisposition, but I don't know if I can.
If you think about it,
that
people may
when
be
you
born
think that
that
the
way.
baby has a mental disorder,
Yeah.
that is kind of scary.
Yeah, we don't generally think that you're born with it. That's really, you might, just like any other illness there, you can be born with a predisposition to diabetes or heart disease or something, and the same for mental illness.
Okay.
So if you have a first degree relative, your chances of having or experiencing a mental disorder will increase slightly. Okay, and so
But why?
for
But
many
why?
people,
Why would it though? Yeah, but yeah, that's what I mean. If it's not hereditary, if you can't be born with it, why would your chances increase if someone in your family has a mental illness?
Behavior.
Well, that too is difficult to separate really what is nature, like the hereditary and the environment, because you share that generally with the people who are first degree relatives. So it could be, and that's always the debate, which comes first, It could be that if you're my mother and you have a mental illness, I live in an environment with you, that some of your attitudes and behaviors will influence me as well. And so that might also influence how I am able to cope and to deal with life.
But is that a mental illness, or is that just a learning pattern?
It gives the person a predisposition. So sometimes what happens, and this is the ticklish part, sometimes what happens is, now when that person may be faced with a stressor in their life, that is when sometimes the symptoms of the illness will really come through.
I suppose because they have not been given the tools to cope with that sort of situation.
It's difficult to break, you see. It's like how much is genetics and how much is the environment. And generally we'll say both play a role, and it's really difficult to tease apart which is really, or how much of each is at work there.
Okay. And what are the different, I'm sure there are many, but in terms of standing out and the top ones, what are the kind of top mental issues that, especially in Saint Lucia, that we're surrounded by?
Well, the most common illnesses we'll see here are depression and anxiety, certainly.
And that's termed as a mental illness?
Depression is a mental disorder. Well, the mood disorders, which comprises, having a major depressive disorder. Yes, it is a mental. It is a mental disorder.
So that's the number one for us in Saint Lucia.
It's very common. Obviously, illnesses like schizophrenia are quite chronic. These are sometimes the people we'll see walking around and behaving differently or in odd ways. Generally, you may find more of them out on the streets, but it's really a chronic condition that will affect people for a lifetime.
And let me just remind you, viewers, that we're actually talking about your mental attitude, all right? But I want to get some of these issues out first so that you can recognize what it is that you are frowning upon sometimes, and what it is that sometimes you are actually saying some terrible things to these people, because it's not some of these people, it's not really their fault. And if you actually had to stop to talk to some of these people, you'll find that they were just like you and me, and something happened to, trip the scales for them, I
think that is the most humbling part of my work, I find, because so often I see people who say to me, I would never imagine that this would happen to me. And it really humbles me, because I realize even in my profession, I'm vulnerable. We all are. Doesn't matter your sex, your race, your class. It doesn't matter. It doesn't discriminate, and it really can affect any one of us.
But that statement, I never believed this would happen to me. What level of mental illness would someone be to recognize that? I mean, can someone who is mentally unwell say, I didn't believe this could happen to me? Because you'd feel that if they're mentally unwell, they won't know anyway.
Mentally ill people are intelligent. They are thinking, they are, they have periods in which they are well, and not all mental illnesses have psychotic features, which is generally, I think, what people think about when they think of mental illness. That these are people who we label crazy and mad, and I think generally we associate that only with psychotic features. But the point is, there are over 200 mental disorders. Okay. And there are only a few.
I have one of them.
There are only a few that have psychotic features.
Okay.
And so there are lots of people out there with a diagnosable mental health condition. Okay. Many of them may be among us. We don't know. They go to the doctor, they take the medication, and they don't disclose it.
And so it does. Okay. In the old days, they used to practice this shock treatment. I'm not saying that they don't do it anymore, but it was very kind of...
I've never actually understood what this shock treatment was.
Okay, explain to Karen then, what is the shock treatment?
Electroconvulsive
Is it really, no, seriously, I've heard people talk about it and I have just dismissed it as no human being would deliberately shock another human being. That has always been my reaction to it. So I've always just said, yeah, that's just something that people say and it doesn't really happen.
It was used more, I guess, frequently before, and it really did seem to help some people. But these are people with extreme conditions, with extreme depressions.
What is it supposed to do?
Really, literally shock you.
Back to reality.
And, you know, again, activates areas in your brain that would help people to...
I thought it was just meant to calm you down because you've just got so that you need to be calmed down. You see all these images on TV, you know, with the straight jackets, and then they strap you up, they put the monitor on you, you get shocked, and then you're lucid. So I just thought that's what it was about, just to calm them down. So you're actually saying that the shock...
It works in different parts of the brain. And the thing about we don't consider is that really mental illnesses are, you know, they are diseases. And there are things going on, whether it's the chemistry of the brain, whether it's the structure of the brain, etc. There are problems there. And so if we can get to that, and that's where the medication can help sometimes. Because we take medication because there are things, maybe chemicals that are not balanced or whatever it is, and that helps.
How do you get to it, Francesca? I mean, and I suppose that's one of the things that we might be looking at. But how do you get to it? How do you get to that point, either as an individual, or looking at somebody or being around somebody that you can actually say you have an issue? I think with depression is. If you are intuitive, it's easy to pick up depression, even in yourself. But aside from depression, how are you able to identify that somebody living with you, or even yourself, that you have one of those?
Okay, well, I would like you to answer that question, and I think it's going to give us, we need a better answer than the time we have right now. So let's go to the break, and when we come back as well, as I said, we have Aagee Simpson going to be joining us on the line. This is DBS and the Dolor Factor Live. We'll see you soon.